Good morning. Let me tell you from the outset, I'm not an economist. I am a retired counselor, but I do have an opinion regarding what our world is coming to, what on earth is happening. I can remember as a kid my grandmother saying, "What's happening to the world?" And I've had the same question. What is our world coming to? What is Trump doing? These are some of my questions. So I'm thinking he's enacting a historical plan which is called a protectionist trade policy. Trump's trade relations proposal is rooted in this protectionist trade policy, which prioritizes domestic job creation and economic growth by leveraging tariffs or trade negotiations. However, when this plan, whether it works, depends on several factors and perspectives. The first point is motivation. President Trump's motivation seems clear: boosting American manufacturing, creating jobs, and reducing the U.S. trade deficit. By encouraging other countries to rely on American manufacturing, the plan aims to strengthen domestic industries. And that could work. While the plan may create jobs in the U.S., if other countries agree to these terms, it could face pushback from trading partners. Countries like Canada, where I'm from, where I am, may see it as a coercive or unfair as it shifts production dynamics heavily in favor of the U.S., potentially harming local industries in Canada and elsewhere. And so I wake up with this feeling of like, where are we going? Where are we headed? What is going to happen next? Are we going to suffer economically? And I think we are. The protectionist plan, this approach, could strain international relations. I watched him address the world leaders yesterday. Canada, for instance, has its own manufacturing base and might not want to outsource production to the U.S. just to avoid tariffs. It might lead to retaliatory tariffs, which a lot of countries have been talking about, including Canada, or a breakdown of long-standing trade agreements. Canada and the U.S. has had such a peaceful partnership for many years. Like, why change it now? Because Trump's trying to make America great again. But I wonder if he isn't creating enemies. For Canada or any other country, this policy would only make sense if outsourcing production to the U.S. is cost-effective. If the U.S. manufacturing costs are higher due to wages, regulations, etc., it might not be economically feasible for Canadian companies to comply. This could lead to higher prices for consumers in both countries. And, definitely they're saying it's going to be higher prices in Canada. We are going to suffer. Our manufacturers they're going to suffer. The guys who make lumber and ship it to the U.S., they're going to suffer. And I'm thinking, like, with all the fires recently in California, wouldn't it make sense that California is going to need a lot of lumber in order to rebuild? I think levying a tariff on lumber right now is a bad idea. Protectionist policies can create inefficiencies in global supply chains, where each country specializes in what it does best. Distributing this balance may harm global trade and economic growth overall. So I'm thinking of all the leaders who were at that trade meeting or that meeting yesterday. And they're probably all thinking the same things. This is not a good idea. It causes countries to become inward and look after themselves instead of like everybody helping his fellow man. The trade has been going on for a long time. Why can't we just keep it as it is? So you have to ask, will it work? Well, it depends on what working means. If the goal is to protect American manufacturing jobs in the short term, it might have some success. However, the long-term consequences could include trade wars, which I can see coming, increased costs for consumers, there's a lot of rumor of that right now, and reduced competitiveness, both for the U.S. and other countries involved. and our Canadian businesses. For a plan like this to succeed, it would require careful negotiation and cooperation, ensuring that it benefits all parties on all sides rather than just the U.S. unilateral demands. This could backfire in the global economy. Protectionist trade policies have been used historically often with mixed results. So these policies aim to shield a country's domestic industries from foreign competition by imposing tariffs, quotas, or other barriers to trade. While they have sometimes achieved a short-term goal, they have also led to significant economic and political consequences. So here are some key historical examples. 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It was in the United States. So what happened? During the Great Depression, the U.S. enacted the law to protect American farmers and manufacturers by imposing steep tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. The outcome was that other countries retaliated with tariffs of their own, which is what our country, Canada, has been talking about, and leading to a collapse in global trade. This deepened the economic crisis and prolonged the Great Depression. So the lesson here is that protectionism in times of economic instability can exacerbate instability. It can create more problems than it solves. During the 16th and 18th centuries, might seem like a long time ago, none of us lived there. What happened? So European nations like Britain, France, and Spain pursued mercantilist policies to build wealth by maximizing exports and minimizing imports. They often imposed tariffs, subsidies, and colonial trade restrictions. So the outcome was that while mercantilism enriched colonial powers, it often came at the expense of colonized nations and stifled competition. It also led to political unrest and wars over trade. So the lesson here was that protectionism can work in a controlled environment, but it often creates conflict and inefficiencies. So then in 1815 and 1846, during those years, Britain imposed tariffs on imported grain to protect the domestic agriculture. This kept grain prices high, benefiting landowners, but it hurt consumers and industrial workers. So the outcome was that public pressure eventually led to the repeal of corn laws, ushering in an era of free trade. So that repeal caused a shift away from protectionism and a shift towards economic liberation. So protectionist policies often favor specific groups while harming others, leading to social and political pushback. That's what I see our world coming to. That's what I see our country, Canada, coming to. So tariffs is not a new idea. Trump's administration in 2018, 2020, when we used to have him as president then, or the U.S. had them as president, the U.S. imposed tariffs on goods from China, Canada, and other countries targeting steel, aluminum, and other products like oil and gas and lumber. The stated goal was to protect American jobs, and sounds good, and reduce trade deficits, another benefit, right? So while some industrialized industries benefited, others, like agriculture, suffered from the retaliatory tariffs. The policy also increased costs for consumers. Now, hasn't he said that he's going to lower grocery prices, for example? Anyways, modern global supply chains make protectionism more complex, often leading to unintended consequences. Protectionism can temporarily safeguard jobs during a downturn, though the long-term use can backfire. Doesn't sound like a good idea. Protectionism fails when other countries start imposing their counter tariffs, leading to trade wars. Consumers pay more for goods when imports are restricted, and protectionism can harm international supply chains and reduce overall economic growth. So, doesn't it seem like it's a backfire? So, in conclusion, the protectionist trade policies have been tried throughout history with varying degrees of success. I think in the short term, there is some gain. While they may address that short term, they often lead to inefficiencies, economic isolation, and retaliation from other countries. So, most economists agree that free trade with some regulation generally promotes greater global prosperity in the long run. So, I have concerns about these policies because to me it seems that it's an isolation policy. It means that we're cutting off our interactions with other countries, and it means that we've become inward. And, you know, I've often said that with any isolation, there's a potential for abuse to occur. It doesn't benefit any of us in the long run. So I have concerns about where our world is coming to. And, as a counselor, I was always concerned about the individual as opposed to, beauty queens getting up and saying, I pray for world peace. I used to think, well, that's very noble. But in my 70th year, I'm becoming more concerned about politics and economics and just what is happening to our world because it affects us individually and collectively. We should be looking out for one another and looking how we can benefit one another as opposed to isolating ourselves and saying, I'm going to look after just me, my country. It could be a good thing, but I do have concerns. That's my counseling point of view.